What if I told you there's a hidden switch inside your brain that can turn off anxiety, panic, and emotional overwhelm in seconds? What if you could face any crisis with the unshakable calm of a samurai warrior, your heart rate steady, your mind crystal clear, your actions precise and powerful no matter what chaos surrounds you? This isn't science fiction or mystical fantasy. This is an ancient Japanese technology of the mind that neuroscientists are only now beginning to understand and validate. And today, you're about to discover how to activate this switch within yourself, transforming from someone who reacts to pressure into someone who masters it. For centuries, we've admired those rare individuals who remain perfectly calm under extreme pressure. The surgeon whose hands don't tremble during a 6-hour operation where a single millimeter of error could mean life or death. The CEO who announces massive layoffs with compassion yet unwavering steadiness. The firefighter who runs into a burning building while everyone else runs out. The negotiator who stays perfectly composed while being screamed at and threatened. We've called them gifted, special, even superhuman. We've told ourselves they were born different, that this kind of composure simply cannot be learned. But we were wrong, profoundly, completely wrong. The truth is far more exciting and empowering. These individuals have simply accessed and mastered what ancient Japanese martial arts masters called Heijoshin, the constant mind, the everyday mind that remains unwavering regardless of circumstances. It's not about suppressing emotions or becoming robotic. It's about mastering your internal world so completely that external chaos cannot touch your inner peace or cloud your judgment. It's the difference between being a leaf tossed in a storm and being the eye of the storm itself, calm, centered, and powerful, while everything around you rages. Modern research has now confirmed what samurai knew 800 years ago through direct experience. Your brain has a built-in panic button, the amygdala, that can hijack your rational thinking in milliseconds when it perceives threat. But evolution also gave you an emergency override system, and the samurai discovered the exact sequence to activate it. Today, you'll learn this same sequence, a 3-pillar system that will rewire your brain's response to stress and pressure. Chapter 1: The Reactive Mind Trap. Meet Hiroshi. On paper, he's the picture of success. A rising star at a prestigious financial firm, educated at top schools, with a career trajectory that looks like a straight line upward. But inside, he's drowning in a sea of constant anxiety and emotional reactivity. When his boss sends a terse one-sentence email, his heart pounds so hard he can feel it in his throat, and a cold dread settles in his stomach that lasts for hours. When traffic unexpectedly congests his commute, his hands grip the steering wheel until his knuckles turn white, his jaw clenched tight enough to cause headaches. During important presentations to senior partners, a single challenging question can make his mind go completely blank, his carefully prepared knowledge vanishing into a fog of panic. Hiroshi isn't weak or incompetent. He's simply untrained in managing his own mind. Like most of us, he operates under the unconscious assumption that his emotional reactions are objective facts about the world. The anxiety twisting his gut before a major client meeting must mean he's not prepared enough. The hot flash of anger toward a colleague who missed a deadline must mean he's been treated unfairly. He's a slave to the frantic, often irrational internal narrative
that his emotions write for him in every moment of stress.
He's living in what neuroscientists call amygdala hijack, where the primitive, emotional part of his brain takes over, flooding his body with cortisol and adrenaline, shutting down his prefrontal cortex, where rational thinking and decision-making occur. In this state, he's biologically incapable of accessing his full intelligence and capability. His attempts to control this only make things worse. He bites his tongue until it bleeds, forces unconvincing smiles, tries to push through with sheer willpower. But suppressed emotions don't disappear. They metastasize. They become chronic insomnia as his mind replays stressful scenarios at 3 a.m. They become a simmering resentment that subtly poisons his relationships with his team. They manifest as a constant humming anxiety that follows him from the office to his home, a shadow he can never quite escape. The breaking point came during what should have been his greatest professional triumph. After 6 months of meticulous work on a multi-million-dollar acquisition strategy, he was presenting to the company's board when someone discovered a tiny but critical error in his demographic data. The error undermined his entire recommendation. As the room turned against him, he felt the familiar heat rising in his chest, spreading up his neck. His face flushed a deep, betraying crimson. The voice in his head started screaming about failure, humiliation, career destruction. But this time, something different happened. A moment of crystalline clarity amid the storm. Instead of panicking or becoming defensive, he quietly excused himself, walked to the restroom, and stood before the mirror. For the first time, he looked, really looked, at his own reflection. He saw the raw anger burning in his eyes, the humiliation etched into his brow, the naked fear tightening his lips. And in that moment, a transformative realization pierced through the noise. This reaction isn't helping me. It's systematically destroying me, and I'm doing it to myself. That night, he poured a drink he didn't want and began searching for a different way. His search led him to the writings of legendary 17th-century swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, who articulated a principle that struck Hiroshi with the force of a physical blow. In battle, if you can make your opponent flinch, you have already won. Hiroshi sat with these words, feeling their truth resonate deep in his bones. He realized he'd been flinching at life itself, at emails, at traffic, at criticism, at challenging questions. His entire existence had become one continuous, unconscious flinch, and he knew with certainty that he needed to learn from the ground up how to stop flinching. Chapter 2. The First Pillar. Becoming the Watcher. The first pillar of emotional mastery is what the masters called Fumetsu Namoksu O, the eternal silent gaze. It's the foundational practice of becoming the detached, compassionate observer of your own mind. Samurai would spend hours each day in zazen, seated meditation, not to achieve enlightenment or escape reality, but to build what modern psychology calls meta-awareness. This is the ability to watch your thoughts, sensations, and emotions from a place of stillness behind them,
without being swept away by their narrative current. For a warrior facing death, one moment of blind rage or paralyzing fear meant actual death. They had to learn to see anger arise without becoming angry, to feel fear ignite without becoming fearful. The watcher and the sensation had to remain separate, the awareness distinct from what it was aware of. Hiroshi began with just 5 minutes each morning before dawn. Sitting on a cushion in his quiet apartment, back straight but not rigid, he focused his entire attention on the simple physical sensation of his breath moving in and out of his body. The instructions were simple. When your attention wanders, gently return it to the breath. The first weeks were brutal. His mind fought like a wild animal against the discipline of observation. A thought would arise. That email from yesterday was unfair. And the old Hiroshi would have followed it down a familiar rabbit hole of resentment, mentally replaying the scene and crafting arguments in his defense. The training of Mokuso was radically different. Notice the thought. Silently label it thinking. Then gently return to the breath without self-criticism. It felt futile, like trying to calm a stormy ocean with a teaspoon. But he persisted day after day through the frustration and boredom. Then, slowly, something remarkable began to happen. He started to notice a space opening up between the trigger, a critical email, and his habitual reaction, panic and defensiveness. This gap was tiny at first, maybe half a second, but within it, he discovered something precious he never knew existed. Choice. The choice not to follow the thought, not to become the emotion.
The neuroscience behind this transformation is stunning. MRI studies show that this practice of focused attention and non-judgmental awareness physically thickens the neural pathways in your prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making part of your brain responsible for self-regulation. Simultaneously, it calms the reactivity and actually reduces the gray matter density of the amygdala, your brain's fear and alarm center. You're literally performing neurosurgery on your own brain through the power of disciplined attention. You're systematically strengthening the watcher while calming the reactor. Soon, Hiroshi could feel stress responses beginning in his body, the racing heart, the tight chest, the heated face. But instead of being controlled by them, he could observe them with detached curiosity. Interesting, he'd note silently. My body is activating its ancient stress response. The heart is beating faster. The muscles are tensing. This subtle but profound shift from being your emotions to observing your emotions changes everything about how you experience pressure and challenge. Chapter 3. The Second Pillar. The Breath Anchor. The second pillar is Seikaku na Kokyu, precise breath control. The samurai discovered something incredible that modern science has since validated. Your breath is the remote control for your autonomic nervous system. You cannot be in full physiological panic while breathing slowly, deeply, and rhythmically. The two are biologically incompatible. When you take conscious control of your breath, you send a direct, non-negotiable signal from your body to your brain
that the situation is under control, effectively bypassing the chaotic thoughts and emotional narratives screaming otherwise. For warriors, this wasn't abstract spiritual philosophy. It was a concrete, tactical tool for survival, as vital as sword mastery itself. Hiroshi learned and began practicing box breathing, the same pattern used by everyone from ancient samurai to modern-day Navy SEALs. The technique is simple but profound. You inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold the breath for 4 seconds. Exhale through your mouth for 4 seconds. Hold the emptiness for 4 seconds. This completes one box.
He practiced this pattern not only during his seated meditation, but constantly throughout his day. While waiting in line for his morning coffee, while sitting in his car at long red lights, while waiting for his computer to boot up, he was diligently forging new neural pathways, creating strong associative links between the conscious act of controlled breathing and a physiological state of calm alertness. This was the training phase, building the muscle memory. Then came the real-world tests. The next time he received a stressful email, instead of immediately firing off a defensive reply, he leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and took one complete box breath. Before entering a difficult conversation with a subordinate, he paused outside the door and took 3 deliberate box breaths, focusing only on the count. The results were immediate and tangible. The controlled breath acted as a physiological anchor, pulling him from the turbulent, churning sea of his emotional reactions back onto the solid, stable ground of the present moment. It gave his prefrontal cortex, the watcher he had been strengthening, those critical few seconds of clarity and blood flow it needed to re-engage and choose a strategic response rather than default to an automatic panicked reaction. This isn't psychological magic, it's biological fact. Deep diaphragmatic breathing stimulates the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in your body, and the commander-in-chief of your parasympathetic nervous system, your body's rest and digest mode. Vagal nerve activation triggers a cascade of physiological changes. It slows your heart rate, lowers your blood pressure, and signals your adrenal glands to stop pumping cortisol and adrenaline. By mastering his breath, Hiroshi was no longer a helpless victim of his body's ancient automatic stress response. He now had his hand on the dial of his own physiology. He could, with conscious intent, turn down the volume on his stress chemistry. External pressure existed, of course. The difficult emails, the tough conversations didn't vanish, but his internal physiological reaction to that pressure had been fundamentally and permanently transformed. He had discovered the off switch for panic. Chapter 4. The third pillar. Seizing the initiative. The final pillar is Sentei Otoru, seizing the initiative. In the strategic board game Go, and in samurai duels, Sentei refers to the offensive initiative, the power to force your opponent to constantly respond to your moves, thereby controlling the flow and tempo of the entire engagement. When applied psychologically, this represents a paradigm shift of monumental importance. It means you never, ever allow pressure or adversity to take you by surprise. You pre-decide your calm, rational responses to a wide range of potential challenges and failures before they happen. You actively visualize catastrophic scenarios,
not to cultivate fear, but to systematically disarm them of their emotional power through familiarity. A seasoned samurai would visualize his own death countless times in meditation so that when he finally faced real mortal danger, the terror had been drained away through repeated exposure in his mind. He had seized the initiative from fear itself.
Hiroshi began what modern psychologists call stress inoculation or mental rehearsal. Each evening, during a dedicated 10-minute period, he would sit in a calm state and deliberately run through worst-case professional and personal scenarios. But unlike anxious worrying, this was structured, strategic preparation. For each scenario, his presentation failing spectacularly, his most important client firing him, making a catastrophic public mistake, he would vividly imagine the situation unfolding, feel the initial jolt of shock or shame in his body, and then watch himself in his mind's eye executing his pre-scripted ideal response. He would see himself pausing, taking a deliberate seikaku nakokyu breath, acknowledging the situation without defensiveness, and calmly presenting his solution. Modern psychology confirms why this practice is so effective. Your brain cannot perfectly distinguish between vividly imagined, emotionally charged experiences and real ones. When you consistently visualize a stressful scenario and see yourself responding with calm precision and strategic action, you're actively creating and strengthening the neural pathways for that exact calm response. You're essentially doing mental reps for composure, just as an athlete does physical reps for muscle memory. Soon, when real challenges and pressures arose, Hiroshi's brain didn't default to panic mode. It recognized the situation, however vaguely, and automatically accessed the calm, pre-rehearsed response from his mental library. The neural pathways had been built in advance. He was no longer waiting passively for life to happen to him. He was meeting it proactively at the door, already prepared. He had seized the initiative in the most important battlefield of all, his own mind.
Chapter 5: The Transformation. After several months of dedicated, consistent practice, the three pillars began to fuse within Hiroshi. Fumetsu Namuksu, Seikaku Lakokyu, and Sente Totore were no longer separate techniques he had to consciously recall. They merged into a single, integrated, automatic operating system for his entire being. The ultimate test of this new system arrived during the most important client presentation of his career. He was unveiling a multi-million-dollar acquisition strategy to a notoriously difficult, detail-obsessed client when disaster struck. A junior analyst on his own team passed him a note that read, "Hiroshi, stop immediately. The demographic data on slide 14 is from last year's flawed report. The current data completely contradicts our core recommendation." A fundamental, catastrophic error had been discovered live in front of everyone. The room fell into a dead, crushing silence. All eyes, including the piercing gaze of the skeptical client, turned to him, waiting for his reaction. The old Hiroshi would have been utterly annihilated in this moment. He would have felt a wave of sheer, mind-numbing terror. His face would have flushed a deep, betraying crimson, and he would have stammered through a defensive, panicked, likely career-ending excuse. The new Hiroshi felt the jolt of adrenaline. That was inevitable biology. He felt his pulse quicken, the body's natural alert system. But then something remarkable happened. From that deep, still place of awareness behind his eyes, the place he had built and strengthened through months of Mokuso practice, he simply observed the physiological reaction. Ah, he noted, with detached calm, pressure, high stakes. He didn't fight it, judge it, or get swept away by it. Without a single word, without a flicker of panic on his face, he consciously took one slow, deep, silent seikaku na kokyu breath. In that expansive space, that single breath created, his mind, now trained by Sente Otoru, instantly and automatically accessed his pre-rehearsed protocol for handling professional failure with integrity. The plan was simple and clear. Acknowledge the error transparently, apologize without excuse, and immediately present the solution. He looked the client directly in the eye, his body language remaining calm, open, and confident. I see we have an inconsistency in the data on slide 14, he said, his voice even and firm, without a trace of shake or defensive energy. That is my responsibility, and I apologize for the oversight. The correct, current data actually tells a more compelling story, and I believe strengthens our core argument for the acquisition. I will have the fully revised and accurate analysis sent to your team within the hour, and we can reconvene this afternoon to review it. His response was not emotionless or robotic. It was the pinnacle of emotional intelligence and control. He was in complete command of his internal and external resources. The client, who was prepared for defensiveness or obfuscation, was visibly disarmed by his unshakable calm and direct honesty. The potential disaster was not just averted, it was transformed into a powerful demonstration of supreme professionalism and competence. The client's respect for Hiroshi and his firm skyrocketed. Hiroshi had, in that moment, achieved a living state of Heijin Shin. His mind had remained constant, the same in crisis as it was in peace. In the weeks and months that followed, colleagues began to describe him with words like unflappable, a rock, the calm in the storm. What they didn't understand was that this wasn't an inherent personality trait or genetic gift. It was a skill, deliberately and painstakingly forged in the daily fires of disciplined practice. He hadn't become less human or emotionally numb. He had become more aware, more responsive, and ultimately more free.
The samurai weren't born with supernatural calm. They built it, piece by piece, through systems and practices exactly like the one you've discovered today. They understood that true strength isn't about never feeling fear or pressure. It's about developing the capacity to hold those experiences without being controlled by them. The three pillars work because they don't fight your biology. They work with it in an intelligent, strategic way. The watcher gives you perspective and choice. The breath anchor gives you direct control over your physiological state. Seizing the initiative prepares your mind to respond rather than react. You now hold the same mental technology that created warriors who could face death without flinching, who could make split-second decisions with perfect clarity amid chaos. The question is no longer whether this is possible for you. The question is what you will do with this knowledge. That critical conversation you've been avoiding because you're afraid of getting emotional? That high-pressure situation that makes your hands shake and your mind go blank? That constant background anxiety that follows you everywhere, draining your energy and clouding your judgment? You now have the tools to transform your relationship with all of it, not by fighting or suppressing, but by understanding and mastering. The path to becoming unshakable doesn't require special genes or extraordinary circumstances. It begins with a single, simple choice. The choice to practice, to observe when you want to react, to breathe when you want to panic, to prepare when you'd rather avoid. This isn't about becoming perfect or never feeling stressed again. It's about becoming present and responsive even when stress arises. It's about discovering that beneath the storm of your reactions, there's a calm that cannot be disturbed because it's who you fundamentally are. That calm has been there all along, waiting for you to find it. The samurai simply built the most direct path to it, and now that path is yours.